The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the bustling streets of Lagos. Vendors lined the sidewalks, their colorful wares spread out on tables as the sound of hawking cars filled the air. Essie navigated the crowd with practiced ease, her eyes scanning the various stalls selling roasted corn and fresh fruits. Beside her, Etim walked with his usual laid-back confidence, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jeans. "You know, you're always dragging me into these markets, Etim," Essie said, shaking her head with a playful smile. "Don't you ever get tired of this place?" Etim chuckled, his eyes twinkling as he glanced at her. "You love it, don't pretend. Besides, where else can we find the best suya in the whole city?" He wasn't wrong. The smell of spicy grilled meat drifted towards them, making Essie's stomach growl. She tried to hide the grin, tugging at her lips. As much as she liked to tease Etim about his obsession with markets and the street food, there was something about this moment that she cherished. The chaos of the city, the vibrant energy, and most of all, Etim's constant presence at her side. They had been inseparable for years, ever since their days in university. "Let's stop by there. I'm starving," Etim said, nodding towards the soya stall. Essie sighed dramatically. "You're always starving. One of these days, you're going to eat everything in Lagos." He bumped her shoulder gently, flashing a smile that made her roll her eyes. As they approached the stall, the vendor greeted them with a wide grin, already knowing their order. They were regulars here, and the familiarity of it all made her feel at ease. With Etim, there was never any awkwardness or pretense, just pure uncomplicated friendship. Yet, as much as she treasured their bond, there were moments when Essie couldn't help but wonder if other people saw something more between them. There had been that time, just a few months ago, at Laura's wedding. Essie remembered how the conversation had gone that day. The laughter, the teasing, they were all seated at the reception. Their group of friends chatted about everything under the sun. "You two look like you would make a perfect couple," Sandra had said, her tone teasing but her eyes serious. Everyone at the table had joined in, throwing knowing looks at both her and Etim. Essie had brushed it off with a smile. "Please, we're just best friends. Besides, that would ruin everything." Etim had smiled along, saying nothing to challenge the idea. It was the same every time their friends made that suggestion. She and Etim would laugh it off, pretending it was a ridiculous notion. But that moment at the wedding had stuck with her longer than she cared to admit. Back in the present, Essie glanced at Etim as they waited for their food. The thought filtered through her mind again, unwanted but persistent. Could they really ever be more than friends? No, she shook her head. It was impossible. Their friendship was too important to risk. They had always been there for each other, through every breakup, every disappointment, and that was enough. It was another typical evening at Eddie's place where a small group of friends gathered together after work. The living room was buzzing with conversations and laughter as they settled in for what was supposed to be just another night of light-hearted fun. Edith, as always, was the hostess, keeping everyone entertained with her sharp wit and endless supply of wine. Essie had been quiet all night, her mind still spinning from her most recent breakup with Donald. She had thought he was different, so she could see herself with long-term, but in the end, he had turned out to be just like the rest. Too complicated, he had said. She was too much for him. The word still stung. Her friend had noticed her mood, and as usual, they rallied around her, trying to cheer her up. "Come on, Essie. Enough with the brooding," Laura said, nudging her playfully. "It's time for you to move on. We've got just the thing for you." Essie glanced around at her friends. Sandra, Henry, Ben, Laura, and Edith were all looking at her with mischievous smiles. She raised an eyebrow suspiciously. "Oh no," she said, leaning back in her chair. "What are you all up to this time?" Laura exchanged a glance at Edith, who grinned and leaned forward. "We have a little deal for you. Something to take your mind off that idiot Donald." Essie crossed her arms. "I'm not in the mood for games. Exactly why you need this," Sandra chimed in. You've been too serious lately. You need some fun, something crazy. Essie shook her head, already feeling tension in her chest. What kind of crazy are we talking about here? Edith leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming with excitement. We dare you to marry a stranger. The room erupted in laughter, but Essie's stomach dropped. You can't be serious, she said, trying to laugh it off. Oh, we are very serious, Edith replied, her smile never fading. Think about it. You're always too cautious with love, always overthinking. This is your chance to do something wild, something completely unexpected. But marry a stranger, that's ridiculous. Is it? Harry chimed in, sipping his drink. People do it all the time in arranged marriages. Besides, it's not like you actually go through with it. It's just for fun. Laura nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. It's like a game. You won't even know who the guy is until the day of the wedding. It will be a thrill and adventure. Essie's heart raced as they all looked at her, waiting for her to give in. She felt the pressure building, and despite herself, a small part of her was intrigued. After all, what had playing it safe ever gotten her? Heartbreak, time and again. Maybe, just maybe, doing something crazy was what she needed to shake things up. But there was one person she needed to talk to first. Okay, she said, holding up her hands to stop their chatter. Let me think about it. She pulled out her phone and dialed Etim's number. He was the only one who could help her think straight. The one person she trusted to tell her if this was a terrible idea. But after a few rings, the calls went to voicemail. Etim, call me back when you can, she said quietly into the phone before hanging up. Her friends watched her expectantly, their eyes gleaming with mischief. Come on, Essie, Sandra urged. You're always so responsible. Live a little. It's not like you're singling your life away. If it doesn't work out, you can just walk away. You even get a free trip out of it. A trip? Essie asked, confused. Edith smiled shyly. Oh, didn't I mention? The deal comes with a reward. A 10-day trip to the most romantic country in the world. All expenses paid. And if you want to dissolve the marriage afterwards, no strings attached. Harry added. Essie hesitated. It sounded too good to be true, and that only made her more nervous. But with Etim unreachable, and her friends all watching her like they were daring her to take the leap, something inside her clicked. She needed to break free from her own fears, from the heartbreak that had been haunting her. Fine, Essie finally said, her voice trembling slightly. I'll do it. The room exploded into cheers, and her friends clinked their glasses in celebration. Essie tried to smile, but deep down she couldn't shake the growling pains in her stomach. What had she just agreed to? The next morning, Essie awoke with a mixture of excitement and dread. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the previous night. The day had felt like a joke then, a harmless game, but now that the reality of it was sinking in, she wasn't so sure. She tried Etim's number again, but once more, it went to voicemail. With no one else to turn to, she felt completely alone in her decision. Her friends had arranged everything for her. The dress, the venue, even the groom, though she still didn't know who he was. All she knew was that she was about to marry a stranger, and the only thing waiting for her afterwards was a trip to an unknown destination. As she slipped into the white wedding dress, Essie couldn't help but feel like she was walking into a dream, or maybe a nightmare. She stared at herself in the mirror, her reflection unfamiliar in the soft folds of the satin lace. This wasn't how she ever imagined her wedding day to be. Her friends arrived to help her get ready, all smiles and excitement, oblivious to her inner turmoil. You look stunning, Edith said, adjusting the veil on her head. Your groom is going to be blown away. Essie forced a smile, but her hands trembled as she smoothed down her dress. Do I at least get to know who he is before I walk down the aisle? She asked nervously. Laura laughed. Nope, that's the fun of it. You'll find out when you get to the altar. Essie's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of her decision pressed down on her. What had started as a silly day now felt like something much more serious. She wasn't sure if she could go through with it, but it was too late to back out now. The venue was a grand hall, bustling with excitement and celebration. It was a beautiful, sun-drenched day, the perfect setting for a wedding. Brides and groom filled the place, each couple getting ready to begin their new lives together. Every face seemed to be lit up with joy except for Essie. Her heart raced as she stood behind a curtain, waiting for her name to be called. The atmosphere around her buzzed with excitement. She felt entirely out of place. Unlike the other brides, she wasn't here for love, for the new start of a new chapter. She was here because of a dare, and soon she'd be standing next to a man that she had never met, about to take vows she wasn't sure she believed in. Her friends had been chatting excitedly in the emo ride over, pointing out all the happy couples who were walking in, but Essie had remained silent. In her mind, she kept replaying the phone call to Etim that had gone unanswered. What would he think of all this? Would he laugh? Tell her she was crazy? Or maybe, just maybe, would he be jealous? She sighed, the tightness in her chest growing. Ready? Edit, whispered, appearing behind her with a grin. Essie managed a small nod, but her stomach churned. The sounds of the crowd swirling around her, a distant hum as the other brides began walking down the aisle. Each bride was met with cheers, applause, and loving gaze of their waiting grooms. She would hear the vows being exchanged, the laughter, the soft rustling of the wedding dresses. This was a real wedding, and yet, here she was, caught up in a game no one else knew about. Finally, the officiant voice rang out again. And now, the bride, Essie. Essie's legs felt heavy as she stepped forward, her hands trembling as she clutched the bouquet. The room was filled with the smell of roses and the sound of soft piano playing in the background. As she stepped through the curtains and began walking down the aisle, she kept her gaze straight ahead, afraid to look at the crowd, afraid to see the face of the man waiting for her. And then, there he was, Etim. She stopped in her tracks, her heart plummeting to her stomach. Etim stood at the altar, dressed in a sharp black suit, his face as sharp as hers, his eyes widened, his mouth slightly parted, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze around them. The room full of people disappeared, the music faded, and all that remained was the two of them, best friends, standing on opposite sides of the altar neither of them had ever imagined. Essie blinked, unable to move, unable to think. How could this be happening? How had Etim ended up here, in the same ridiculous situation as her? Etim, she whispered, her voice barely audible, but he heard it. He nodded slowly, his expression still one of complete disbelief. Essie, what? How? The officiant cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the moment. Please continue walking, bride. Essie couldn't move, her feet felt glued to the floor, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. Was this part of the deal? Had her friends planned this too? And what did it mean for her and Etim? Could they really go through with this? Etim stepped forward, his hand outstretched. Come on, he said softly, his voice steady despite the shock on his face. Let's figure this out together. She hesitated only a second longer before taking his hand. His touch was familiar, comforting, and in that moment, despite the confusion and the madness of it all, Essie felt a small wave of relief. At least she wasn't doing this alone. At least it was him. They walked the rest of the way together, side by side, as they had always been. The ceremony itself felt like a blow. The officiant spoke the traditional vows, and before she knew it, the words "I do" slipped from her lips. Etim echoed the same, his voice calm and steady, but Essie could feel the tension between them, the weight of everything left unsaid. They had both gone through with it. They were married. After the officiant declared them husband and wife, there was applause from the crowd, the kind of applause that was meant for real love, for couples who had planned their big day, not for two people thrown into a marriage by a strange twist of fate. Etim turned to her, offering her a small smile as the officiant spoke the final words. You may now kiss the bride. The crowd excitement swelled, but Essie's heart skipped a beat. Kiss Etim. They had never been more than friends, and now they were expected to share their first kiss as a married couple in front of everyone. Etin must have sensed his tension because he gently took her hands again, his tongue brushing across her knuckles. "Don't worry," he whispered, leaning in close, so only she could hear. "We don't have to do this if you don't want to." Essie swallowed hard, her mind spinning. Was this really happening? Her best friend, the one person she had always counted on, was not her husband. And yet, as strange and surreal as it felt, part of her didn't want to pull away. Part of her wondered if this was exactly where she was meant to be all along. With a shaky breath, she leaned in, closing the distance between them. The kiss was soft, barely more than a brush of lips, but it sent a jolt through her that she hadn't expected. It was quick, but it changed everything. As they pulled apart, Etin gave her a look she couldn't quite read, but there was something there, something neither of them had acknowledged before. The applause continued, but Essie barely heard it. All she could think about was how everything between them had just shifted. After the ceremony, they retreated to a private room, away from the crowd and the noise. The shock was still settling in, but now they needed answers. "How did this happen?" Essie asked, pacing the room as Etin leaned against the wall, watching her with a mix of confusion and amusement. "I should be asking you that," Etin replied, his voice calm. "How did you end up here?" Essie stopped, her hands flying to her head in expression. "It was a bet, a stupid, ridiculous bet. My friends dared me to marry a stranger. Well, I thought it was all just a game. I didn't think you'd be the one waiting for me at the altar." Etin raised an eyebrow. "A bet? Seriously?" "Yes, and now we're married," Essie said, the word feeling foreign and heavy on her tongue. "How did you end up here?" Etin shrugged. "Funny enough, I had a similar bet. I got dragged into this by some of my colleagues. They said I needed to do something wild, so here I am. The last thing I expected was to see you." They both stared at each other in disbelief, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. "So now what?" Essie asked quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. Etin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Now I guess we figure it out. We go on the trip, like they said, and when we come back, we can decide what we want to do next." Essie nodded, though her heart was still racing. "And if we don't want to stay married, we can walk away. No harm done," Etin said gently. "But maybe we should see what happens first." The flight to their destination was filled with silence, but it wasn't the kind of silence that weighed them down. Instead, it felt like the calm before the storm, a quiet reflection of everything that had just happened. The city below them grew smaller as they soared into the clouds, but Essie gazed out of the windows, her thoughts a tangled mess. Beside her, Etin scrolled through his phone, occasionally glancing her way as if trying to figure out what she was thinking. The awkwardness between them was new and unsettling, like they were two strangers again, despite knowing each other for years. "You okay?" Etin finally asked, breaking the silence. Essie nodded, though she didn't feel okay. "I still can't believe you're doing this." "Neither can I," he admitted with a small chuckle. "But here we are." She turned to him, her eyes searching for his face for some sort of reassurance. "Do you think we're crazy?" Etin's smile softened. "A little, but we've done crazier things together. Remember that time we took that road trip without a map and got completely lost?" Essie laughed despite herself. "I still can't believe we found our way back. And we will this time," Etin said confidently. "This is just another adventure." But this time, it wasn't just about getting lost on a road trip. They were lost in something much bigger, something neither of them had planned for. The plane began to descend, and Essie's heart raced again. As she looked out over the city, the coastline stretched out in its endless lines of shimmery blue, dotted with white beaches and palm trees swaying gently in the breeze. It was the perfect place for a romantic getaway, a place meant for lovers, not two people trying to figure out if they could be more than friends. The hotel was perched off on a cliff overlooking the ocean, and the view was nothing short of breathtaking. The moment they stepped into their room, the sound of the waves crashing against the shores filled the air, and Essie felt a mix of emotions, excitement, anxiety, and the faintest flutters of something she couldn't quite name. Etim dropped his bag on the floor, walking over to the balcony. He leaned against the railing, staring out at the horizon, and for a moment, Essie just watched him. She had seen him like this 100 times before, relaxed, lost in his thoughts, but something was different now. He wasn't just her best friend anymore. He was her husband. She shook her head, still trying to wrap her mind around that word. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Etim said, breaking into her thoughts. "Yeah," she agreed, walking over to stand beside him. "It's perfect." The ocean stretched out before them, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the water. The air was warm, with just the right amount of breeze, and for a moment, Essie allowed herself to enjoy it. Forget about everything that had led them here, and just breathe. "You know," Etim said quietly, "you don't have to do anything if you're not comfortable. You don't have to act like we're married." Essie finished for him, her lips quaking into a smile. He laughed, though there was a hint of awkwardness in it. "Yeah, exactly." Essie appreciated that about Etim, his ability to make her feel at ease, even in the most bizarre situation. But as she stood there next to him, watching the sun dip lower in the sky, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like if they actually did act like a married couple, feel as natural as everything else between them had always been, or would it be the beginning of something neither of them could handle? Over the next few days, they explored the island together, slipping back into comfortable rhythm that always defined their friendship. They hiked up cliffs to see the views, ate at small local restaurants, and even took a boat ride out to the sea, laughing and joking like they always did. But beneath it all, there was this tension that neither of them could ignore. The knowledge that they weren't just friends anymore hung in the air, changing the way they looked at each other, the way their hands sometimes brushed when they walked side by side. One evening, after a long day of exploring, they returned to their hotel room, exhausted but happy. Essie collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling, as the events of the day replayed in her mind. The ocean waves crashed in the distance, a soothing sound that made her feel oddly calm despite the confusion swelling in her head. Etim sat on the edge of the bed, pulling off his shoes. "You're tired?" he asked, glancing over at her. "Yeah, but it's the good kind of tired," she replied with a smile. "Today was fun." "Yeah, it was," he agreed, leaning back on his hands. "You know, I've been thinking." Essie rolled onto her side, propping herself on one elbow. "About what?" He hesitated, his eyes flickering to the window before settling back on her. "About us, about the whole thing." Her heart skipped a beat. "Oh, I mean, we didn't plan this, and it's probably the most ridiculous thing we've ever done. But what if this is where we were supposed to end up all along?" Essie stared at him, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" Etim shrugged, a small subtle smile tugging at his lips. "I don't know. It's just everyone always said we look good together. We always brushed it off, but maybe they saw something we didn't." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Essie didn't know how to respond. She had spent years pushing away any thought of being more than friends with Etim, convinced that it would ruin everything. But now here they were, married, whether by accident or fate, and she couldn't deny that something had shifted between them. "I've been thinking about that too," she admitted quietly. Maybe they were right. Etim looked at her, his expression softening. "So, what do we do now?" Essie swallowed hard, her mind racing. She didn't have an answer, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the question. The next day, they went to the quiet beach at sunrise. The sky was painted with shades of pink and orange. The sand cooled beneath their feet as they walked along the shores in silence. There was something different in the air, a quiet tension that had been building ever since that night in the hotel room. Essie could feel it in the way Etim's hands brushed against hers, in the way their gaze lingered, just a little longer than before. As they reached a secluded part of the beach, Etim stopped turning to face her. The sun cast a soft glow over his face, and for a moment, Essie forgot to breathe. "I need to know something," Etim said, his voice low and steady. "Do you think we could be more than this?" more than friends. Essie's heart pounded in her chest, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had always been afraid of this moment, afraid of what it would mean for them. But now, standing here with him, she wasn't afraid anymore. "I think," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I think we could." Etin stepped closer, his hands gently cupping her cheeks. "Are you sure?" She nodded, her breath catching in her throat as their eyes met. Everything else faded away. The past, the doubts, the fears. All that remained was the two of them, standing on the edge of something new. Slowly, Etin leaned in, and this time, when their lips met, it wasn't hesitant or awkward. It was soft and sweet, but there was a fire underneath it. A spark that had been waiting to ignite for years. When they finally pulled apart, Etin smiled down at her, his eyes filled with a warmth that made her heart flutter. "So," he said softly, "I guess this is the part where we figure out what happens next." Essie smiled back, her fears melting away. "Yeah, I think I'm ready to find out." The flight back home was quiet, but this time, the silence between Essie and Etin was comfortable. They had spent the last 10 days exploring, talking, and most importantly, confronting their feelings. What had begun as a dare had transformed into something much deeper. Something neither of them had expected, but could no longer deny. As the plane touched down, and the familiar skyline of the city came into view, Essie's heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. What would happen now as they went back to the real world? What would their friends say when they found out their bet had turned into an actual marriage? She glanced at Etin, who sat beside her, looking relaxed, yet contemplative. His expression, as always, was steady and reassuring, and there was something different between them now, something that couldn't be undone. Whilst they were off the plane, they gathered their luggages and made their way through the busy airport. The noise, the chaos of the city welcomed them back. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, Essie felt a strange sense of calm. As they stood outside waiting for their ride, Etin broke the silence. "So here we are," he said, giving her a small smile. "Back to reality." "Yeah," Essie replied, her voice soft. "It feels weird, doesn't it?" "It does," he agreed, "but I don't regret it." Essie looked up at him. Her heart skipped a beat. "Neither do I." He nodded, then took a deep breath. "Let's go somewhere quiet and talk," Etin suggested, "just the two of us." Essie nodded, and soon they found themselves at a small cafe, tucked away in a quiet part of the city. It was one of their favorite spots, a place they visited countless times as friends, and now the familiar setting felt strange. They sat at a table near the window, sipping their drinks in silence. The city buzzed around them, but inside the cafe, everything felt still, like the calm before a storm. Etin was the first to speak. "I've been thinking a lot about this, about us, and I realized that I've always felt something for you, Essie. I just never let myself admit it, because I was afraid I'd ruin what we had." Essie's heart pounded in her chest as she listened. She had been thinking the same for so long, but hearing Etin say it out loud made it feel real, tangible. "I was scared too," she admitted. "I didn't want to mess up our friendship, but now that we are married, I can't help but wonder, maybe this is where we're supposed to end up all alone." Etin smiled softly, his eyes warm and full of understanding. "That's what I've been thinking too, and now that we are here, I don't want to go back to pretending. I want to see what this could be." Essie felt her throat tighten with emotions. The past 10 days had shown her a side of Etin she hadn't fully acknowledged before, a side that made her realize how much she had been holding back. They had always been more than just friends, and now they were married. It was time to face the truth head-on. "But what if it doesn't work?" she asked, her voice barely above whispers. "What if we end up regretting this?" Etin reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Then we'll deal with it together, just like we've always had. But if we don't try, we'll never know." Essie looked into his eyes, seeing his sincerity in them. And for the first time, she felt like they were on the same page, like they were both ready to take the leap. "Okay," she said, her voice steady now. "Let's do this. Let's see where this goes." A smile spread across Etin's face as he squeezed her hand gently. "You won't regret this, Essie, I promise." The next challenge was breaking the news to their friends. After all, the whole thing had started as a dare, a game no one had expected to turn into a real marriage. Essie and Etim knew that their friends would have plenty to say about. A few days later, they gathered their closest friends, Sandra, Edith, Laura, Henry, and Ben, at a local restaurant. As they sat around the table, laughing and catching up, Essie felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. She glanced at Etim, who gave her a reassuring nod. Finally, Edith leaned forward with a mischievous grip. "How was the trip? You two didn't kill each other, did you?" Essie and Etim exchanged a glance before Etim cleared his throat. "Actually, the trip was great, and we've got something to tell you guys." The table went quiet, all eyes on them. "We are staying married," Essie blurted out, her eyes pounding. There was a bit of stunned silence before Sandra burst out laughing. "Wait, what? You're serious?" Etim nodded, his hands resting on Essie's. "Yeah, we are. It turns out the whole thing made us realize that we've been avoiding something real for a long time. So we're giving it a chance." Laura's eyes widened in surprise, but a slow smile spread across her face. "I knew it. I've always said you two look perfect together." The rest of the group chimed in with their congratulations and teasing comments, and soon the nervous tension Essie had been feeling melted away. They had expected shock and maybe some disbelief, but their friends were nothing but supportive. As the evening went on, Essie felt a sense of relief wash over her. They had made the right choice, and now with the support of their friends and a new path ahead of them, she was ready to embrace whatever came next. In the next weeks that followed, Essie and Etim settled into their new lives as a married couple. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of awkwardness, moments where both had to adjust to a shift in their relationship. But with each passing day, they grew more comfortable in their new roles, and the love that had always been there began to flourish. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sun set over the city, Essie leaned her head on Etim's shoulder. "I'm glad we did this," she said softly. "I'm glad we didn't walk away." Etim smiled, wrapping his arms around her. "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, the sound of the city below blending into the background. This wasn't how they had imagined their journey together would begin, but now that they were here, it felt right. It felt like home. The end. Thank you so much for sticking to the end. I hope you enjoyed this one. Please don't forget to leave a comment, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye! Thank you so much for watching till the end. Please click on the subscribe button to support us. Turn on the post notification to get notified when I upload a new story. Like, share, and comment your thoughts. Till then, bye!